Welcome back to our study in the book of Genesis. We're now at Genesis chapter 11. Famous story, the Tower of Babel, or Babel in the Hebrew. And I think what I'd like to do this time is kind of walk through chapter 11 with you, kind of as a verse by verse study. As I usually do, you probably are pretty used to this by now. Let's start somewhere other than the chapter we're in. Let's turn to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9. And we're going to look at verses 1 and verse 7 of chapter 9. Verse 1 says, God said, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." I think we heard that before, right? We heard that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27, something like that. If we go down just a couple of verses to verse 7, it says, and you all, it's plural in the Hebrew, y'all, be fruitful and multiply. It's an imperative, so do it. Be fruitful, multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it. This is the only command to be repeated. This is the third time we've heard it, once in Genesis chapter 1 and twice in Genesis chapter 9. So it's unique in that it's repeated 3 times. And twice after the flood. So just in case you didn't get it, God says it again. Have lots of babies. Fill the earth. How does this connect with Genesis chapter 11? So let's go back to Genesis chapter 11. Okay. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. Okay. Kind of makes sense. I mean, you start from 8 people and they have lots of little babies and stuff, and you just make more of yourselves. Okay. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. At this moment, we might think that there's really no connection between the command and this. However, a correct translation may help. You see, in verse 2, the Hebrew does not say people. It says they migrated. Who's they? The whole earth had one language and the same words. They migrated from the east. They found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Go back to Genesis chapter 9. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Verse 7. Increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. What's going on in chapter 11? All the people have one language and one words. They migrate from the east. Boop. Found a plain and settled there. I don't think they're filling the earth. They're staying together as one group of people. Boom. How long did it take people to disobey God's command? Not very long. Or at the very least, we're not starting out looking so good about the obeying, the multiply, fill the earth part of things. Let's keep going. Verse 3. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." They had brick for stone and bitumen, or asphalt basically, for mortar. So that, that thick, oily substance, tar, we might say, for mortar. So everybody's got one language, and they go, and they find a plain in the land of Shinar, they settle there, and they make bricks. Why? Why make bricks? I mean, they've migrated. Noah lived in a tent. We know that. It says that. They've been traveling, so we know they've been tenting along the way. They come here, they settle here, and they make bricks. Why not continue to live in tents? And why burn them? Why burn them dry? Why bake bricks? Why use brick instead of stones? Because it says they had brick for stone. So they could have used stones, but they didn't. They used bricks. And why use this sticky, oily, gooey stuff to glue the bricks together? What's going on here? Now, I know we've just been through Genesis chapter 10, and that might distract us a little bit. The story in chapter 11 is actually a continuation from chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 10 is just a little insertion of some genealogy. It could have been after chapter 11, but Moses, for whatever reason, stuck it there. Okay. But the story, 6, 7, 8, and 9 is what? Flood, destroy humanity. Flood, 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 destroy, destroy, destroy. We get to chapter 11, all the people come, they don't fill the earth. They settle in one place. They make dried, burned bricks, and they glue them together with waterproof material. They don't use stone. It's very hard to fit stone together. It's very hard to cut stone into shapes. But brick, you can make brick in any shape. You can burn it dry. You can cover it with waterproof material and shape it and create structures that are strong and impervious to what? Floodwaters. Why would we want to build a structure as one people group on a plain? You ever been on a plane in a flood? What happens? The water level goes, even if it's a flood, it just creeps up. If you're in a valley, the water level goes whoosh. But if you're in a plain, it rises very slowly. And if you've built a massive building that's waterproof, what have you succeeded in doing for yourself? Ah, that's interesting. Verse 4. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky." The word for heaven and sky is the same in Hebrew, so it could be the top in the skies, the top in the heavens, whatever. Why would you want to make a tower that reaches to the sky? Oh, yeah, so that you could survive the next flood. Interesting. "And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." If you build a city, you're not filling the earth. You're filling one spot, but you're not filling the earth. If you build a tower with its top to the sky on a plain that's waterproof, you can escape the next flood. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, come on, God said, he would never flood the earth again. Do you see? People don't trust God. They doubt his word. Where'd that come from? Oh, yeah. So, disobedience, no trust, doubt in God's promises. What are people doing? They're thinking about themselves, protecting themselves. And then they want to make a name for themselves. Why do you name something? Right? Why do you name your children? So that they are unique individuals, unique persons. Why don't we name every city in America Humphrey? Why does every city have to have a different name? So, because each one's unique, each one's different. So we know, why would you make a name for yourselves if the whole earth has one language and the same words, and they migrate from the east? There's no one else on the planet. Who are they making a name? Who are they being unique from? Oh yeah, there is one other person around who's been rather vengeful, rather wrathful, killed a whole lot of people, of course, promised not to do it again. Tell me that isn't how people act today, right? Tell me that isn't how children act today. They're making a name for themselves to distinguish themselves from the only other name, Yahweh. Now maybe Pastor Tim's making all this up, right? You know what's interesting? At the end of verse 4, let's make a name for ourselves. Why? Why build a city? Why burn bricks? Why use asphalt? Why? Lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Lest we obey God's command. We don't want to be dispersed. We don't want to be killed. We are us. You are that vengeful creator. What's God got to do? Verse 5. Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. Now, I love that little verse. What does God do in order to understand, connect with, relate to his people? God visits. He comes. He doesn't set up a huge telescope. He doesn't make a phone call. He doesn't, ask for a report from some auditors. He makes a personal visit. God always comes down to us. Always. We never go up to him, ever. Humanity never ascends to heaven and says, "Hi, God, let's have a chat." God always comes down to us. He comes down and he visits us. His word comes to us. His angels come to us. His Son came to us. He will come to us. The new city of Jerusalem will come down out of heaven to earth. He comes down to us. He lowers himself to us. And that's what he does here. He comes down to see the city and the tower. And Yahweh said, verse 6, behold, there are one people. They have one language. Yep. Didn't do what I told them to do. What's going to happen? What's the result of the disobedience of my creation? This is only the beginning of what they will do. So God sees this is the start, there's the middle, there's the end. Nothing they purpose to do will now be impossible for them. Now that little statement there kind of sets off some people because they're like, well, God doesn't want us to, have free will. God doesn't want us to do what we want to do for ourselves. Yeah. Why did God put a cherubim to guard the way to the tree of life? Because if he didn't, sinners would eat and live forever as sinners. That's kind of miserable. Are we still sinners here in Genesis chapter 11? Yeah, we've pretty much already established that. Yeah, they're sinning, they're disobeying. And what will they propose to do? Good or evil? Gee, I wonder. So, what does God do? Is he going to punish? He's not going to reward. So what does he do? Verse 7. Come, let us go down there. Let us go down, and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. God's solution to his creation's disobedience is what I like to term inescapable obedience. His method for inescapable obedience is through the confusion of language. Now, this doesn't mean that God created new languages. It simply means that he confused people. And that might be a fine point to make here. That's okay. I just don't want us to go too far and assume that God created something here. Because it doesn't say that he created. It says that he confused their language. Well, what does that mean? Well, a very simple way of illustrating that would be this. If I say blue, and when I say blue, you think furry, fluffy hamster. And I think round, hard, white stone thing in the river. If we try to talk to each other and use the word blue, we're going to be very confused. You're thinking hamster, I'm thinking stone. We're both using the word blue. And if you do that with all sorts of words, then you and I aren't going to be able to communicate. Because not only do we think we're saying the same thing and meaning different things, oh boy, now we're going to start, it's just going to get a mess. It's just going to get confused. And what am I going to do? I'm going to start, well, I can't talk to you. You're making no sense at all. You're saying blue and pointing to the hamster. I'm saying blue and pointing to the rock. I'm going to go find somebody who knows that blue is a rock. And once I find a whole bunch of people who know that blue means rock, I'm going to hang out with them. Because all y'all, you're nuts. And what happens? Division. And when you don't understand one another, you tend to drift away from each other. And you're going to obey the command to fill the earth. Verse 8, so Yahweh dispersed them from there over the face of the earth. They left off building the city. If I say brick and you think drink of water, you and I are not going to be able to build a structure together. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there, Yahweh dispersed them over the face of all the earth. So, in verse 8, Yahweh dispersed. In verse 9, Yahweh dispersed. God is responsible for what happened. But we shouldn't get the idea that God forcefully pushed people or transported them to different places. He simply took an action, and the result of that action was dispersion. So, in a sense, he used humanity's own insecurities and fears against us in order that we would obey inescapably his commandment. And that's hopefully some new, interesting, and helpful thoughts on Genesis chapter 11, 1 through 9. Now I'm going to do two other little parts here in Genesis chapter 11. So if you want, maybe that can be, you and I could say, hey, let's have that as one class. But if we work through this really quickly, then feel free to continue the video. I'm going to go on to chapter 11, verses 10 through 26. As you read chapter 11, verses 10 through 26, your eyes are probably going to get all glossy and cross-eyed, and you're like, oh my goodness, here we go, a whole bunch of names again, right? We just got done with a whole bunch of names in chapter 10. Wow, do we have to do more? In fact, if we look at it, some of these names sound familiar. In fact, I think we did this. We did the whole family line of Shem, and Aber and Peleg and the division, and what's going on here? So, chapter 11, after continuing the story, we have this little insertion of the specific genealogy from Shem to Abraham's father. So chapter 10 covers the whole genealogy of like the planet. Chapter 11 says, oh yeah, let's pick up the story again. Okay, that story's done. Now we're going to really, really narrow in on one particular family line. What's interesting about these little verses here is how they connect not with chapter 10, but with chapter 5. All right, so go back to Genesis chapter 5. I'll do that myself here. Genesis chapter 5. Let's do a little refresher what Genesis chapter 5 was. In Genesis chapter 5, we have the family line of one particular guy, of Adam, through Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel. Okay. And as we looked at this one, we were like, oh yeah, this is where death came in. And it was so weird. People lived forever, and then all of a sudden they stopped living. They weren't murdered. They just kind of stopped living. And it was just like really weird. And then the next one stopped living, and that's really weird. I mean, after you live for almost 1,000 years, to just not be living anymore is, wow, this is weird. And in chapter 5, we saw that there were 10 names given, 10 names listed in the genealogy going from Adam, Seth to Noah. If you go back to Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 and following, you'll see that there are 10 names. But something's missing. So there's 10 in 5 and 10 in 11, but there's something in 5 that's not in 11. We have, they lived so many years, and he has a son, and then he lives so many years, he has other kids. Do you see what we're missing? In Genesis 10, somebody lived so many years, he had a kid, he lived so many years, and he died. In Genesis 11, so many years, has a kid, so many years. There's no death. It's like nobody dies. This whole family line here, from Shem to the father of Abram, nobody dies. That's kind of nuts. Why make such a difference, an obvious difference between chapter 5 and chapter 11, between two genealogies that are obviously so connected that you use the same number of names, follow only one family line, result in the story about the guy at the end of the family line? Why? In chapter 5, everything leads to death. From Adam until Noah, it all led to what? The flood, the destruction of humanity. Death upon death. Through this family line, we will get to life, everlasting, eternal life. Because through this family, through this one man named Abram and later Abraham, comes the gift of faith. And those who believe have eternal life, not death. Okay. And finally, in Genesis chapter 11, the last set of verses, 27 through 32. These are the generations of Terah. Terah. He fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now, I would encourage you to start a genealogy, a written genealogy, a little piece of paper, and keep that with you for the next, 10 or so chapters, sessions in Genesis, because we're going to refer back to, this is just one sample of a genealogy here. We're going to refer back to Terah and his children, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. We're going to refer back to this family tree a lot. And when I say a lot, that's kind of a pun, because through Terah's son Haran comes Lot. Abram and Sarai and Terah have a very unique relationship. Yeah, I'll just leave it with the word unique. Nahor has children who then begin to intermarry. So there's this huge family intermarriage, interrelationship thing going on. And so to kind of keep track of it, I would encourage just a little bit of a genealogy that you keep on your own. Starts with Terah, then we have the three kids, Abram, Nahor, Haran. Haran, we get Lot. Now, Haran, Abram's brother, died in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. Okay, so Lot is left without a father. Now, Abram and Nahor, they get married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. The daughter of Haran. So Lot has a sister, right? Because Haran fathered Lot, and Milcah was the daughter of Haran. So Lot and Milcah are brother-sister. Nahor's wife is Milcah, the daughter of Haran. And she fathered Milcah and Iscah. And all that's to just make a little comparison contrast that Sarai had no kids. Then, story continues, Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, because she was married to Abram, and they left Ur to go to Canaan. But along the way, they took a little pit stop, a little bathroom break in Haran, and said, hey, this place is so cool, let's just live here for a while. And they lived there. And then Terah dies. So Abram and Nahor are left without a dad. Lot is left without a dad and a granddad. So he's going to cling on to his uncle, Abram. And when Abram, or Abraham, leaves Haran to go to the promised land, Lot's just going to come along with the family there. But Nahor isn't going to leave. He's going to stay there. And that's really super important, because when Abraham, eventually has a kid and wants a wife for that kid, he's going to send for his relative, family member up from Nahor's line, and say, hey, can one of your kids marry one of my kids? And then that will happen again with his kid. He'll go back up there, find a wife. Actually, he finds 4, but that's a story to come. So you kind of see how this, even though people are moving around, this genealogy is going to connect and interweave. And from this genealogy, pretty much comes the rest of the stories of the Bible. We talk about the Canaanites, we talk about the Philistines, we talk about Edom, we talk about, all of them. They're all interrelated. They're either interrelated because they live in the same place, or because they're, daddy's daughter married each other. I mean, it's crazy. Everybody's interrelated here in one way or another. So these little verses here kind of set up for us the family tree upon which the rest of the stories, really, of the whole Bible are based. But it also sets up the conflict here, which is very interesting. We have the first instance of barrenness. We just got done in the first part of Genesis chapter 11 talking about being fruitful and multiply and filling the earth. And they were fruitful, but they didn't fill the earth. And so God said, okay, you're going to fill the earth. You're going to be fruitful. You're going to multiply. And all of a sudden, here's a woman who doesn't have any kids. What? She's trying to have kids? She's trying to obey? So we have this conflict, this tension that's set up here at the end of chapter 11. And that's going to lead us into, like I said, the story of faith, the story of the chosen people, the story that leads down to Jesus. We're going to switch now. We're going to switch from big picture to one family and pretty much one person at a time through the rest of the book of Genesis. We're going to focus on Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. And then from there, we're going to kind of split out a little bit. We get Moses and all of the people of Israel, and Joshua and all the people of Israel, and then the judges, and then the kings. But pretty much for Genesis, we're going to be looking at just one person at a time. So let me try to sum up the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis. In these chapters, we've seen how the world began. We've seen how humanity began. We've seen how humanity first sinned, and we've seen that sin passed down and enlarged generation after generation after generation. We've seen how God deals with runaway worldwide sin. We've seen how God, in that just wrath punishment, remembers Noah and saves his human creation from ultimate destruction. We've seen how all the people on the planet came to be. We've seen how all the nations weren't accidentally placed or ended up where they were, but God determined that. We've seen how even in the restart, humanity continues to rebel. We've seen how different languages came to be in the planet. We've seen a lot in 11 chapters. A lot. And now in chapter 12, we're going to slow down. I mean, kind of like slamming on the brakes and putting horse blinders on and closing one eye. I mean, we're really going to slow down and narrow in. So, from the big picture of everything. So kind of be prepared for a change. And finally, let me say this. Following up on a theme that I've touched on a couple times. God started out with one dude and one dudette, one man, one woman, and said, have dominion over the planet. Serve and guard. Be my representatives. How'd that work out? That was terrible. He starts again with Noah. How'd that work out? Not really so well. He's going to start out again. From Adam to Noah to Abraham. How's Abraham going to work out? We're already seeing a lot of tension. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Not so much. We've got barrenness coming in. Will Abraham be obedient in better ways than Adam and Noah? Will he be God's representative to the world in such a way that the world will know God through him? We'll find out. It's kind of like God's take 3. Third time's a charm? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how things turn out. So until then, thank you. Thank you for studying God's Word with each other. May the Lord bless you and keep you.